Alright everyone, we're back with more Witch on the Holy Night. We're currently on a point where we have both Sojiro and Aoko teaming up to square off against a mannequin that apparently Aoko fought prior to this whole scenario, and now it's come back to, I guess, get its revenge, if anything. So that's where we are right now, and if anything else, I hope you all continue to enjoy. Thank you again for all the love and support. You guys are the best. Let's continue forward. Alright everyone, and we are back. Aoko had taken Sojiro with her, claiming that the reason she did so was to prevent her prey from escaping. In other words,
青崎はまだ諦めてないんだな。
当たり前よ。あんなやつ、仮に2体と半分始末しても、あんた用の余力は残せるわ。
her tone was sharp, but even Sojiro could see that she was struggling to stay confident. The damage to her body was too much to afford her any optimism. Still, the fury in her eyes refused to accept her circumstances.
中がところどころショートしてる。あの右腕は回路を混戦させるジャミングってわけね。
Though the proper response would have been for her to tremble in fear, she did nothing but shake her fists in anger. The disruption of the formula was only supposed to work on absolute beginners. If it had been her roommate, the arm would have been repelled the instant it hit her and the attacker's circuits burned out, rather than her own. Attempting to establish a link to the magic circuits of another mage was like presenting your heart on a silver platter. It would be of no use in a battle against a superior mage. And yet her adversary had been designed to do just that. Coupled with the attacks in areas of Misaki under Aoko's jurisdiction, these last few weeks it was a clear statement from the enemy, who as of 2 days ago had revealed itself as a fellow mage. In other words, the puppet saw Aoko as no threat at all.
敵ながら正確な判断だこと。
While she was still angry, the whirlwind of emotions within her started to fade. Her face was that of a hunter far beyond her years.
なんか俺の時より真剣だな。
まあね、あんたの時は遊びが入ってたし。
Sojiro was not sure whether to be happy or sad at that.
わからないことだらけで何を聞いていいかわからないんだけど、一つだけいいか。
Aoko didn't respond. Her eyes were focused in the darkness before them. The silence was heavy and the darkness was like a noose closing in on them. But Sojiro continued in spite of her indifference.
青崎はあいつも殺すのか。
A silence fell over them. It was as if the gloom was pulling them in. No response. Their breathing was only the sound echoing in the dim corridor. There stood Sojiro, forcing her to confront her sins and the magician girl who continued to ignore him. They spent a few seconds seemingly frozen in time.
そう。それがあなたのキーワードみたいね。
Aoko whispered in a lifeless tone. Her sigh was tinged with both resignation and contempt.
何？
独り言よ、忘れて。それと、言っとくけど、あいつは人間じゃないわ。信じられないだろうけど、自分の意志で動く人形なの。この前のも、今のやつもね。
Sojiro nodded as he processed the information. Not only did he not doubt her story, but he seemed to have accepted it at face value.
なんか落ち着いてるわね、あなた。
まさかもう何が何だかわからないからあまり考えないことにしてるだけだ。ただ人形に関しては別にどうということはない。
もしかして他でも自動人形を見たことあるとか？
都会の人形ってああいうものじゃないのか？
She barely stopped herself from falling to her knees. Of course, how could she have forgotten? she was dealing with a bona fide natural-born moron. As a student who transferred from the isolation of the mountains like an endangered species, his utter lack of common sense rendered anything miraculous as mundane. If automobiles were moving hunks of metal, then moving puppets were nothing to write home about. Wait, that meant, to him, the incident from the other night hadn't been extraordinary at all. He might have even assumed it was an everyday occurrence in the city.
参った。いっぺん頭の中覗いてみたいっていうか、ほんと、ここまで来ると感心するわ。
I take it this means she's actually willing to let him go once this is all over?
調子が狂うのも当然だった。普通は私に襲われた時点でもっと違う反応をするはずなのに。化け物とか、お化けとかさ。でもあなたにとっては、そういうこともあるで済まされてたわけなんだ。なんかバカみたいね、私。
Her strained face returned to normal for a moment. It hit her. There had been another way to handle this without anyone getting hurt. But the damage had already been done. There were no do-overs in life, nor should there be. Her own mistaken assumptions had sent that situation spiraling out of control. But now that Sojiro was involved, she had to make sure that her secret was safe with him. Even if there had been another, better option, that ship had sailed. Human relationships were ultimately driven by mutual misunderstandings. Like tapestries woven from mismatched intentions. Break time was over. There stood Aoko Aozaki and Sojiro Shizuki. The first idle conversation they had since first meeting had come to an end. Not that they had a choice in the matter, it was the jarring murmuring from around the corner that cut it short.
Nemo nus memnit, vedroit extinct sest. Initio eraberamos dom brevimus dolores sunt. Nemo adiuvat.
The enemy was just around the corner, visible in the mirrors parallel to it.
悠長に話してる場合じゃないわね。とにかく今は距離を。
Well, holy cow. In contrast to Aoko's elegant blues, its lights were a malicious red.
感動打ち。
There was a momentary flash of light before she even extended her arm. But the instant she saw the enemy, her dormant feelings erupted once more.
さっきから邪魔なのよ。
She channeled all of her pent-up anger and shunted it into her right arm. The fog that filled the corridor was no magical weaving, but rather a barrier of raw energy. It was equivalent to setting a blaze to 3 buckets of gasoline to create a wall of fire, in the hope it would stop an arrow in flight. If the puppet had attacked with its arm, it could have pierced such a wall easily. But because it had loose curses with no definite form, the wall of energy repelled the attack. While it was a huge waste of magical energy, it was the only means Aoko had to protect herself in that very moment. Unfortunately, its protection was reserved to Aoko alone. Sojiro held his hand to his mouth. While the curse had been weakened to the point where Aoko could no longer feel it, it had plenty of effect on Sojiro, who was not a mage. As if it understood this fact, the puppet turned its gaze from Aoko to the unanticipated human behind her.
こいつは関係ないでしょ。
Enraged, she swung her arm forward once again. The blue light formed the wall to block the gander for a scant few seconds. It was enough of an opening to exploit. Just as Aoko was forming the wall, the puppet pointed its right arm at her face and...
関係あるみたいだから逃げるぞ。
Before the rocket of death could be fired, Sojiro scooped her up. How he mustered the strength to do so was a mystery, but he turned his back on the puppet and took off running. Smart man. He was a nimble sprinter, resembling a deer leaping across obstacles. Sojiro rounded 2 more corners, ignored whatever complaints Aoko was making. and eventually stopped in the middle of the second floor. He set her down.
よし、ここまで来れば少しは休めるな。
Sojiro's shoulders heaved as he caught his breath. As light as she was, running while carrying someone else would make anyone winded. She looked up at him in incomprehension.
こんな体力あったのに、なんで？
It made no sense to her. If he had the stamina to pick her up and run, surely he could have stood up and escaped when he had been downed earlier.
ああ、あの時は諦めてたから。
His words were unfiltered as ever. Though in this moment, fighting for their lives, he lacked some of his usual absent-mindedness.
諦めてたってどうして？
さあ、忘れた、そんなことは。
Though he may have turned away because he regretted saying it aloud, his words spoke volumes. For some reason, it pained Aoko to see him like that.
それより青崎、唐突に気分が悪いんだが、あの赤い光も、その…
ええ、魔術の類よ。ガンド打ちって言ってね。北欧の呪詛の一つ。魔術回路のある私には効かないけど、抵抗のないあなたには効果てきめんみたいね。
なんだ、青崎には効かないのか。じゃあ、危ないのはあの腕だけだな。
Aoko had no idea why he was relieved, but she gritted her teeth and fought down the urge to snap at him. There was no use in yelling at a time like this. Above all, she felt that it would have been pretty in the extreme to voice her annoyance right now.
そうね。注意するのは伸ばしてくる腕だけ。大した相手じゃないわ、やっぱり。
This time it was not a false bravado. Such an enemy would normally be a breeze for Aoko Aozaki. But her shameful negligence had led to disruption of her magic circuits, making her even less formidable than her enemy. At this point, Aoko had no way of attacking. The only option left to her was to wait for it to expend all of its magical energy, but its perpetual curse mechanism made that a non-starter. This game of tag would not end until one of them was dead. She realized that she was in the same position she had cornered Sojiro in earlier. She glanced at her right arm. She could not imagine how she had gotten into such a mess with her magical energy at more than half of its capacity. This had to be karma for having enjoyed toying with Sojiro earlier.
呆れた。いるところにはいるものね、神様って。
She grumbled under her breath as she shifted her focus. She had the feel for the fire but not the igniter. And that killing machine would chase her until the end of time if need be. What she should do next was blindingly clear. She had to get back to normal.
青崎、
ごめん、考え事してた。確か…よし、合ってる。しずきくん、そこに横道あるのわかる？
あ？
Aoko pointed, but he could see nothing but the walls of the corridor. For one thing, the floor had nothing but left turns and Aoko was pointing to the right.
2階は中心まで行くと1階に降りる階段があるんだけど、それは私が壊したから使えないの。けど、ここの作りも意地が悪くてね。よく見れば、右に曲がる通路もあるのよ。上級者だけにわかる抜け道ってやつ。あとは注意して探せば、1階の階段までショートカットできる。悪いけど、一人で行って。
Aoko turned her back to Sojiro and started walking. Walking in the opposite direction of the escape route and down the long corridor toward the puppet in pursuit.
あいつは無差別だから、ここで壊さないといけない。魔術師は魔術師同士で争うのはいいんだけど、みだりに一般人に手を出しちゃいけないって決まりがあるの。
Well, at this point, it doesn't seem like Sojiro is normal either.
あいつの目的は私のわけだし、結果がどうあれ、すっきりするでしょ。
If Aoko won, the puppet would be destroyed. If Aoko lost, its objective would be complete and it would shut down. Either way, them going their separate ways would mean Sojiro survived. This is what Aoko meant, though she explained it as if the events were happening to two totally different people.
運が良ければ入り口までたどり着けるわ。それじゃあまた明日ね。
Even Sojiro could tell she was just trying to act tough, but she had already disappeared around the corner by the time he thought to stop her. Mentally, Aoko bemoaned the disaster she was in. The quality of this puppet was on a completely different level compared to the one from the park 2 days ago. An auto-incanting perpetual motion machine was a rarity in and of itself, but this puppet was also equipped for battle with its extending arms and gander projecting crystalline eyes. It was a first-class product that, if put on the market, would sell for hundreds of millions of yen. Although that was only when factoring in its value as an antique. For the purposes of combat, it would have made more sense to mobilize a significantly less expensive familiar. To use such a precious commodity as a tool for murder marked this puppet's master as a completely different breed of crazy from the enemy she had faced up until now.
Vivo in som solitare putoresque inferis. Ictius meus obitus dies, et meus nativus dies. Theobeum.
来たわね。
A sound of crackling music box filled the air. The automata, animated by its own curses, approached. The corridor measured approximately 30 feet in length. Aoko lay in wait around a corner further down the hall, anticipating the puppet's appearance. This was not to buy Sojiro time to escape. Far from it. Aoko had concluded that she couldn't make a break for it under the current circumstances. Even if she did try to escape, and by some miracle made it out of the House of Mirrors, that was as far as she would go. Outside with no cover, Aoko would quickly be overtaken and skewered from behind. As long as her magecraft was disabled, escape was impossible. Instead, she chose to force the enemy back. Her situation was not the most favorable, but neither was the puppet's. Though this narrow hall gave Aoko no place to run, it in turn prevented the puppet from reaching full speed. That was the weak point of this machine. Automata of its era had a tendency to struggle with minute changes in speed.
セット。
She flowed energy into her shorted circuits. Her blood flow and magical energy supply were unstable. It would be difficult to construct a formula in this state. All she could do was harden her right arm by imbuing it with as much energy as she could. Doing so turned her arm into an improvised weapon like a hammer or a bat. Assuming she could manage to get into a close combat range, this was the best she could do. All she needed now was a plan of attack. The question wasn't what weapon to use, but how to use the weapon she had. The simplest way would be to use the mirror's reflections to hide and then rush the puppet from its blind spot, except for one major problem. It did not have a sense of sight in the first place. The puppet's view of the world around it did not stem from visual feedback, but from mapping the topography of its surroundings. In theory, it was the same as a bat's echolocation. The environment could be measured based on the emission and return of high-frequency sound waves. Those chants served as sensor pulses. As far as the puppet was concerned, the mirrors are no better than transparent panes, making even the thought of an ambush laughable.
近づけば近づくほどよりリアルに察知される。本当は遠距離からの狙撃が最適なんだけど、ガンドを撃ってくるならフィンの一撃ぐらい隠してるわよね。
Gander was a Scandinavian in origin, and considering its simplicity, highly versatile. It was most effective at impairing a target's health by pointing a finger. Which is funny because that's exactly the same spell that Tosaka used on Shiro in Unlimited Blade Works. As a single-action magecraft, it was limited to only causing illness, but there was a secret technique said to be the greatest mastery of the Gander shot. The Fin shot. It could do more than cause simple illness. It was a deadly curse that could stop the heart. The wound on her back set her nerves on fire. An unarmed girl and a deadly automaton. It was clear that she was the one destined for death. She considered her slim chances of survival, when... a vision sent chills down her spine. Quietly, using everything she could to clamp down on the feeling, Aoko faced her all too familiar illusion. She clenched her teeth to keep them from making a deafening clatter. But there, the sensation of fingers crawling up her neck. Behind her, the specter stared and laughed. This alone made Aoko want to bolt. On top of it all, when Aoko tried to mentally simulate the coming fight, she estimated a 2 in 10 chance of dying in the first 5 seconds. 20% at times her predictions were harsher than reality. If Aoko fought the puppet 10 times, she would die twice. She could not stop herself from visualizing her own corpse. She imagined herself collapsing, crumpling under the puppet's curse. Her eyeballs swollen like a blowfish, blood and other fluids oozing from every bodily orifice. 1 in 5, 1 in 5, 1 in 5. A 1 in 10 chance of death was bad enough, but 1 in 5? It drove her crazy. Aoko forced down her heart as it tried to escape from her mouth. Taking in a deep breath, she peered at her own reflection. She thought back to that white night half a year ago. This, she decided, was nothing compared to that. 6 months ago, at the Kuonji estate. The Hound of White Roses, the Wonder Snatch that appeared from within the thick fog, had killed Aoko 100 times out of 10.
Me anima immortalis, otem eftera negata sunt. Manes sum, animam definira ambiguum est.
A dark curse shattered Aoko's daydream. It was only 30 feet away. The puppet rounded the corner. Either side stood in the shadows, their forms indistinct. The puppet gave no warning. Without preamble, it swiftly fired again their barrage. Just as Aoko planned, the curses fizzled out as they hit her mist-like barrier of magical energy. The protection would only last a few seconds, giving her just enough time to... Its stretchable spear sprang towards Aoko's face.
Bingo!
The lethal weapon grazed her cheek. All her experience analyzing puppet attack patterns gave her the wherewithal to evade the attack by a hair's breadth. It was one thing if a puppeteer were pulling the strings, but autonomous dolls had their limitations. Aoko had bet everything on this killing machine following a predefined template. The puppet would use a given attack for a given range, and she could adjust her tactics to that.
Ikeru! Kono mama!
Before its arm had a chance to fully retract, she charged the puppet. It was a risky gamble, but her overall chances were slim to begin with. The scales tipped in her favor. If her predictions were correct, there were 2 ways she would die. One was from a fin shot fired at that range. And the other was if the puppet's attack pattern was beyond her ability to foresee. Instantaneous mass transfer, otherwise known as mass displacement. Immediately after Aoko dodged the puppet's arm, something smashed into her abdomen. That has got to hurt. The head-on collision from its shoulder felt like a rocket. But where had the ability to propel itself come from? Puppets like this were not built to have the ability to jet around like that. Doing everything in her power to stay conscious in spite of the pain, Aoko could just make out what had happened.
今の推進力じゃなくて牽引力。
Yes, the puppet's arm had not returned to its body. It was lodged in the wall and reeled itself in from the other direction.
そんなのありか！
Swallowing her surprise, she hastily pulled herself back up. Her abdomen, specifically her diaphragm, had been dealt a significant blow. The attack left her disoriented. Thankfully, the puppet was surprisingly lightweight. Her bones and organs were intact, and she had sustained no life-threatening damage. She was having a hard time breathing, however. She was shaken, though. She managed to keep her calm. In another 2 seconds, she'd be back on her feet. No, that was 2 seconds too long. She told herself to calm down, that she was already calm. She'd only briefly lost her bearings. She was fine. She could recover her breath and her vision later if only her body would move.
Intellectus non necessaris est, piesque escat, o nostra sentiabulat fit. ratio fix tantum est. Dolores nitium cerebrum fit.
Above her, Aoko could hear the warped noise of a powerful force.
足動けでもどっちに行けば
She could once more feel the touch of death.
E salvatio. E salvatio. E salvatio.
The puppet was so close that Aoko could reach out and touch it. That also meant that it could reach out and kill Aoko.
こいつの右腕の死角に入れる
By intuition alone, Aoko rode over to the puppet's right flank. Its arm was still embedded within the wall. From here, it could not attack. She had made the right decision and her dizziness faded.
Intellectus non necessaris est. Pius quiescat. Un nostra sente abulat fit. Ratio fix tantum est. Dolores nitium cerebrum fit.
Aoko pulled herself back up. It was her turn. It was only an instant. Within the labyrinth of mirrors, she saw an image of herself.
E salvatio.
A blinding, brilliant light flashed. Lacerations appeared across the walls. At the last moment, Aoko managed to thicken the magical energy running through her veins into a primitive form of magecraft resistance. It just barely saved their life from what must have been the puppet's ace in the hole. The puppet bore a striking resemblance to Aoko. This powerful curse was not satisfied with stopping Aoko's heart, but destroying her entire being. Aoko did not even have the time to be shocked. This was her chance for a counterattack. The puppet's balance was unsteady, its right arm still embedded in the wall. Aoko prepared to give its defenseless body a strong kick, but her knees buckled and she collapsed into a heap on the floor.
Vebo in somno. Solitare pudres cuniferis. Ictius meus obitus dies. Et meus natibus dies. Theobeam.
A sudden nausea and lightheadedness overcame Aoko. Her body temperature began to rapidly lower.
しまこいつ呪いをばらまいてるんだった
She noticed too late. The puppet's curses encircled the hall. The curse chant that the puppet used as a source of power doubled as a defense mechanism, crippling those who drew near with illness. She bore the full brunt of the entire time she was in close proximity to it. Although Aoko had magic circuits, she was succumbing just as Sojiro had. Languidly, she forced her deteriorating body to jump back.
負けるか
With all the energy she could muster, she forced her way past the exhaustion caused by the curse. However, Aoko's blood pressure took a steep nosedive, not from the curse-induced anemia, but from what appeared in front of her. They stood in perfect harmony. In front of Aoko was the automata that shared her face, its left arm held out like an arrow. The deadly weapon shot forward and homed in on her heart. Then, a moment before it made contact,
危ない
the moment she heard that fearless voice completely out of place in this storm of violence, Aoko's body was pulled forcefully to one side. Once again, the extending arm cut through the empty air. While Puppet quickly retracted its left arm, Sojiro took the brief opportunity to take Aoko by the hand and flee at full speed. Good thing he came back. Sojiro ran through the corridor as fast as he could, only stopping when he had to put enough distance between them and the puppet.
その考えてみると
Though he had saved her, she looked angry rather than grateful. This did not keep Sojiro from saying his piece.
明日はどうも忙しいみたいなんだ
In other words, let's finish this today. A rather awkward proposal. Aoko remained silent. She was also rather angry. Not that she could not figure out what made him tick, nor because he had returned after escaping. Not even because he was spouting his typically airheaded lines. it was, she supposed, that instant. The fact that when he grabbed her hand, her mind had gone completely blank, Aoko found it unforgivable. Which beckoned the response.
あなた、正気。
In the heat of the moment, she blurted it before she could stop herself. Alright guys, I'm going to end the video here for today. Thank you all for watching. When we come back, we're going to continue on with this story and hopefully conclude it.